The dust in the spare room always seemed to settle with a particular kind of heavy, silver intent, coating the surfaces Julian no longer touched. It had been 4 months since Elias moved out, and the silence of the apartment had grown teeth. It nibbled at the edges of Julian's focus, a constant, low-frequency hum of absence. He was reaching for a stack of old architectural journals on the highest shelf of the hallway closet, intending to finally box them up for the library donation, when his fingers brushed something that wasn't paper or gloss. It was wood. Smooth, cool, and slightly bowed in the center. He hooked his fingers over the edge and pulled. It was a simple cedar box, the kind Elias used to keep his fountain pens in, but heavier than it should have been. Julian sat on the floor of the hallway, the journals forgotten. His knees cracked in the quiet. He didn't mean to open it. He told himself he was just checking for dampness or silverfish. But the lid gave way with a soft, pneumatic sigh, and the scent of sandalwood and Elias's specific, sharp sweet omega pheromones, faded but unmistakable, hit him like a physical blow to the sternum. Inside were envelopes. Dozens of them. None of them had stamps. None of them had addresses. They were all marked with a single name in Elias's precise, slightly slanted handwriting, Julian. Julian, you are snoring. It is 3 in the morning on a Thursday and the sound is vibrating through the mattress and into my hip bone. I should wake you up. I should nudge your shoulder and tell you to roll over, but I am sitting here at the kitchen table instead because if I wake you, you'll look at me with that bleary, half-asleep smile and ask why I'm crying, and I don't have a version of the truth that fits into a 3 in the morning conversation. I didn't know I was going to be the kind of person who writes letters he doesn't send. It feels like a cliché, something out of a Victorian novel where everyone dies of consumption and longing. But my chest feels too small for everything I'm carrying tonight. We went to that Italian place tonight, the one with the chipped floor tiles and the waiter who remembers your wine order. You looked so happy talking about the new bridge project. Your eyes get that specific spark when you talk about structural integrity. I sat across from you and thought about how much I love your hands. They are steady. They build things that stay up. And I felt the sudden, terrifying urge to reach across the poster and grab your wrists and tell you that I think something is breaking inside me. Not the kind of breaking you can fix with a blueprint. A quiet breaking. I didn't say it. I just asked for more Parmesan. You laughed and told me I was a bottomless pit. I love you. I'm writing it here because saying it out loud tonight felt like a goodbye, and I'm not ready for that yet. Not yet. Julian's thumb traced the edge of the paper. The ink was slightly blurred in the corner, a dried salt stain where a drop of something had fallen. He remembered that dinner. It had been October. The air had been crisp, and Elias had worn that oversized charcoal sweater that made him look small and soft. Julian had thought Elias was just tired from the end of quarter rush. He hadn't noticed the way Elias's hand had trembled when he reached for the wine glass. He hadn't noticed the way Elias had watched him, not with love, though love was there, but with a desperate, frantic kind of observation, like a man trying to memorize a map before it was burned. Julian's throat felt thick. He reached for the next envelope. It was thinner, the paper cheaper. I saw a dog today that looked like the one you had when you were 10. The golden retriever you told me about, the one that used to sleep on your feet and wait for you at the bus stop. This one was sitting outside the bakery, looking at the door with such absolute, unwavering faith that its person was coming back. It made me ache. I bought a croissant I didn't want just so I could sit on the bench and pet its ears. I wondered if I'm like that dog. Or if you are. I think I'm the one who is going to leave the bakery and not come back through the front door, Julian. I had the appointment today. The one I told you was just a routine physical for the insurance renewal. It wasn't. The doctor has a very symmetrical face. I found myself focusing on the bridge of his nose because if I looked into his eyes, I would have had to acknowledge the things he was saying. Cellular atrophy syndrome. It's a mouthful, isn't it? It sounds like something that happens to old batteries. He said the word degenerative 4 times. I counted. He said there are treatments, but no cures. He talked about windows of time. He talked about trajectories. I walked out of the office and the sun was so bright it felt insulting. I went to the bakery. I saw the dog. I came home and made the roast chicken you like. You're in the living room now, watching the news. I can hear the muffled voice of the anchor. You have no idea that the world ended at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I'm going to go in there and sit next to you and I'm going to pretend that I'm still the person I was this morning. I have to. If I tell you, you start looking at me like I'm already gone. You'll start grieving, and I can't be the person who brings that into this house. Not while the sun is still out. Julian stood up, the box clutched to his chest. He walked into the kitchen, his movements mechanical, and sat at the small breakfast nook where they used to drink coffee. The apartment was too quiet. The refrigerator hummed, a lonely, industrial sound. He remembered that day in November. He had come home and found Elias in the kitchen, the smell of rosemary and roasting chicken filling the air. Elias had been humming a song Julian didn't recognize. He had looked so normal. Julian had kissed the back of his neck, noted the scent of his skin, warm, slightly floral, deeply comforting, and had gone to change his clothes. He hadn't seen the shadow. He hadn't seen the way Elias's shoulders had been braced against the weight of a secret that was already beginning to crush him. Julian opened the third letter. Then the fourth. Then the fifth. The letters were chronicle of a slow-motion collapse. Elias wrote about the first time his leg gave out in the hallway, how he'd blamed it on a tripped rug. He wrote about the way he started deleting the shared photos from his phone, one by one, trying to thin out the digital evidence of his existence so it wouldn't hurt as much later. He wrote about the Tuesday. It's Tuesday. I've decided. I'm going to start pulling back. It's the only way, Julian. I saw the way you looked at the travel brochure for the Alps today. You want to go next spring. You're planning a future that I'm not going to be able to walk through. If I stay, if I let you love me through this, I will become a burden. I will be the reason you can't go to the Alps. I will be the person you have to lift into the bath. I will be the memory that ruins your 30s. I love you too much to let you be that good of a man. I'm going to be cold. I'm going to be distant. I'm going to make you think I've fallen out of love with you, or that I'm bored, or that I've found someone else. No, I couldn't make you believe that. But I can make you think I'm restless. I can make you want to leave me first. That would be the greatest gift I could give you. A clean break. A chance to be angry at me instead of devastated by me. Anger heals faster than grief. I'm going to start tomorrow. I'm going to say I need space. I'm going to sleep on the sofa. I'm writing this so I don't forget why I'm being so cruel to the person I love most in the world. If you ever find this, please know that every mean thing I say from now on is a lie. The only truth is that I am terrified, and I am doing this for you. Julian's hand hit the table, a dull thud that echoed in the empty kitchen. He felt a surge of hot, jagged anger, not at Elias, but at the sheer, beautiful, stupid martyrdom of it. He remembered the sofa. He remembered the 3 weeks of cold shoulders and one-word answers. He had thought he'd done something wrong. He had spent nights lying awake in their bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had become boring, if the spark had simply died for Elias. He had asked, and Elias had looked at him with eyes that were like flint and said, "Maybe we've just run our course, Julian." Julian had felt his heart crack then, a slow, spiderweb fracture. He had tried to fight for them, but Elias had been a fortress of indifference. Julian had eventually stopped fighting because he thought he was respecting Elias's autonomy. He hadn't realized he was being managed. He hadn't realized he was being protected from a reality he had every right to share. Letter 12. Dated January 5th. Julian's heart jumped. This was the contradiction. Letter 3 had promised to stay until the stars went out. Letter 12 was a frantic, messy scrawl. I can't do it. I can't keep the distance. You touched my hand today when you passed me the salt and I almost broke down right there. I want to tell you. I want to scream it. I want to bury my face in your neck and let you hold me while I shake. The symptoms are getting harder to hide. My vision blurred twice this morning. I dropped my favorite mug, the one with the blue bird on it, and I couldn't even feel my fingers well enough to pick up the pieces. You came in and saw the mess and you looked so worried, and I just snapped at you. I told you to leave me alone, that I wasn't a child. I saw your face fall. I'm a monster, Julian. I'm a monster for trying to save you this way. But then I think about you 5 years from now, sitting in a hospital room, watching me forget how to breathe, and I know I have to keep going. I have to make you hate me. It's the only way you get to keep your life. I'm moving out next month. I've already looked at a small apartment near the clinic. I'll tell you I found a place closer to work. I'll tell you I need to be alone to find myself. It's such a pathetic, tired line. I hope you believe it. I hope you hate me for it. Julian closed his eyes. He remembered the blue bird mug. He had bought it for Elias on their first anniversary. He remembered the sharp, biting tone Elias had used, the way he'd retreated into the bathroom and locked the door. Julian had sat on the floor outside that door for an hour, listening to the silence, not knowing that on the other side, Elias was probably writing this very letter, his hands shaking, his heart breaking in sync with Julian's. The gap between the person Julian thought he knew and the person in these letters was a chasm, wide and deep and filled with a love so fierce it was almost violent. Julian reached for the next letter. It had a date, April 12th. Julian's breath hitched. That was the day of the picnic. The day they had met at the park, 3 months after the breakup, to exchange the last of the boxes. It had been a beautiful spring day. Julian had thought they were finally reaching a place of friendship. He had felt a flicker of hope that they might find their way back. We sat on that blue blanket today. You brought the wine I like, the one from the valley. You looked so good in the sunlight, Julian. Your hair is getting a little longer, and you have that one gray strand near your temple that I never noticed before. I wanted to reach out and touch it. I wanted to tell you that I'm pregnant. I found out 3 days ago. The doctor says it's a miracle, given the stress on my system. He also says it's a complication. A massive one. He asked if I wanted to consider other options. I looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. How could I not want this? It's a piece of you. It's a piece of us that gets to stay even when I don't. But then the fear came back. What kind of father would I be? I can't even hold a mug without dropping it some days. And you, if I tell you, you'll stay. You'll stay out of duty. You'll stay because you're the kind of man who doesn't walk away from a sick partner and a baby. And that's exactly why I can't tell you. I won't have you bound to me by a sense of obligation. I won't have our child be the reason you're trapped in a room full of medical equipment. I sat there on the grass and I watched you talk about your new project, and I felt the baby, just a tiny, theoretical pulse of life, and I felt like I was splitting in two. I asked you if you thought we'd still have found each other if the world was smaller. You said you thought we would have found each other in any world. I almost told you then. I almost said, Julian, I'm dying and I'm carrying your child and I need you. But I didn't. I just smiled and said the wine was good. I'm going to go to the clinic tomorrow. I'm going to make a plan. I'm going to do this alone so you don't have to. Julian's vision went blurry. The paper in his hands felt like it was vibrating. A baby. A child. He had spent the last 4 months thinking Elias had simply moved on, that he was living a quiet, independent life. He hadn't known about the diagnosis. He hadn't known about the pregnancy. He hadn't known that the friendship Elias had offered was a mask for a struggle so profound it defied description. He felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, sharp clarity. He had been so stupid. He had been so focused on his own hurt, on the rejection, that he hadn't looked past the surface. He hadn't seen the shrinking. He hadn't seen the way Elias was carefully removing himself from Julia's future like a surgeon excises a tumor. Julian reached for the next letter. It was written on hospital stationery. I wasn't going to write tonight. The hospital bed is too narrow and the light is too yellow. It smells like bleach and old soup in here. They admitted me for observation because my blood pressure spiked. The baby is fine. Strong heartbeat. Like a little drum. I listen to it and I think of you. I wonder what you're doing right now. It's 11 at night. You're probably reading in bed, that lamp on the nightstand casting a warm glow over your shoulder. I miss that lamp. I miss the way you breathe when you're deep in a book. I'm scared, Julian. For the first time, the protection feels like a cage. I want to call you. I have my phone in my hand. Your name is right there. One tap and I'd hear your voice. But what would I say? Hey, I lied about everything and now I'm in a high-risk ward. No. I can't. I've come too far. I've already made you mourn me in small doses. If I bring you back now, the big dose will be even worse. I'm going to put the phone down. I'm going to look at the moon through this tiny, reinforced window and I'm going to pretend you're looking at it too. We're under the same sky, at least. That has to be enough. Julian put the letter down. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic, uneven rhythm. He knew that hospital. It was only 20 minutes away. He looked at the box. There were only a few letters left. He reached for the next one, his fingers trembling so much he almost tore the envelope. This one was dated only 2 weeks ago. I'm back in the apartment. The small one. It's quiet here. I have a nurse who comes by 3 times a week now. She's nice. She doesn't ask too many questions. My hands they aren't great, Julian. Writing this is taking a long time. But I wanted to tell you about the dream I had. We were in the Alps. Just like you wanted. There was so much snow, and the air was so cold it felt like drinking water. We were walking, and I wasn't tired. I wasn't shaking. We were just 2 people walking in the snow. You were holding a little girl. She had your eyes. You were laughing at something she said. It felt so real. When I woke up, I could still feel the cold air on my face. I think I'm going to name her Clara. If she's a girl. After your grandmother. I hope you don't mind. I know you'll never know, but it makes me feel like you're part of her. I'm starting to realize that I can't manage everything. The doctor says the next few months will be the hardest. I'm going to have to make a choice soon. About where I go. About who takes care of her when. I have the legal papers on the table. I'm naming you as the guardian, Julian. You won't know until the lawyers call you. I hope you can forgive me for that, too. For dropping a child into your life without a warning. But I know you. I know you'll love her. And through her, maybe you'll find it in yourself to not hate me for leaving. Julian's breath came in ragged hitches. He felt a sob building in his chest, a heavy, tectonic shift of emotion that he had been holding back for months. He had been so wrong. He had thought he was paying attention. He had thought he was a good partner. But he had allowed himself to be pushed away. He had accepted the lies because they were easier than the truth. He reached for the last letter in the box. It was a single sheet of lined paper, folded neatly. It wasn't in an envelope. It was the most recent one. It didn't have a date. It didn't have a deep confession. It was written in a hand that was much shakier than the others, the letters large and uncertain. Julian, don't forget to water the ferns. They're in the corner of the balcony, and they need more water than you think. And the milk in the fridge expires on Friday. I'm thinking about making that beef stew tonight. The one with the carrots you always pick out. I might need you to help me chop the onions. My hands are a bit tired today. I think I'll just rest for a minute before I start. The lavender is blooming in the window box. It smells like summer. I love you. I'll see you when you get home. Julian let out a broken, choked sound. The ordinariness of it was what finally did it. This wasn't a letter to a ghost. It was a letter to a version of their life that no longer existed, or perhaps a version that Elias was clinging to in his mind. It was a letter written by a man who was exhausted, who had forgotten for a moment that he was supposed to be protecting anyone, and was simply waiting for his alpha to come home and help him with the onions. Julian sat there for a long time, the letters scattered around him like fallen leaves. The silence of the apartment was no longer empty, it was full of Elias's voice, raw and honest and heartbreakingly present. Julian looked at the clock. It was 5:30. He stood up. He didn't pack a bag. He didn't grab his coat. He just took the box, tucked it under his arm, and walked out the door. The drive to the clinic was a blur of taillights and street lamps. Julian's mind was a storm of images, Elias in the charcoal sweater, the blue bird mug, the sun on the picnic blanket, the way Elias's voice had sounded when he said, "Maybe we've just run our course." He realized now that every moment of the last year had been a battlefield, and Elias had been fighting a war on 2 fronts, against his own body and against his own heart. And Julian had let him fight it alone. He pulled into the parking lot of the specialized care facility Elias had mentioned in the letters. It was a quiet, brick building surrounded by manicured trees. It looked peaceful. It looked like a place where people went to fade away. Julian walked through the front doors, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The receptionist looked up, her expression professional and neutral. I'm here to see Elias Thorne, Julian said. His voice was raspy, unfamiliar to his own ears. Are you a family member? She asked, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I'm his alpha, Julian said. He said it with a weight of certainty that made the woman pause. I'm his partner. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Room 312. Third floor. Julian didn't wait for the elevator. He took the stairs, his boots thudding against the industrial carpet. His lungs burned, but he didn't stop. He reached the third floor and slowed down, his heart in his throat. The hallway was quiet, the air smelling of antiseptic and lavender, the scent Elias had mentioned in his last letter. He found room 312. The door was cracked open. He pushed it inward, his breath catching in his throat. The room was small but bright. There were flowers on the windowsill, lavender and daisies. In the bed, Elias was sleeping. He looked thinner than he had 4 months ago, his skin pale, almost translucent in the evening light. His hand, resting on the white thermal blanket, was curled slightly, the fingers long and elegant even now. And there, beneath the blanket, was the unmistakable swell of his stomach. Julian felt a wave of such intense, agonizing love that he had to lean against the doorframe to stay upright. He walked forward, his movements silent, and sat in the chair beside the bed. He reached out, his hand hovering over Elias's for a moment before he gently, tentatively, laid his palm over the omegas. Elias's skin was cool, but his pulse was there, steady, stubborn, a rhythmic promise. Elias stirred. His eyelashes fluttered, and then he opened his eyes. They were clouded for a moment, disoriented, and then they focused on Julian. For a heartbeat, there was no mask. There was only raw, unfiltered shock, followed by a surge of such profound relief that Elias's eyes immediately filled with tears. He didn't try to pull away. He didn't try to lie. He just looked at Julian, his lower lip trembling. You found them, Elias whispered. It wasn't a question. I found them, Julian said. He took Elias's hand in both of his, squeezing gently. I read every single one, Elias. Why didn't you tell me? Elias closed his eyes, a single tear tracking down his temple. I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to have a life that wasn't this. That wasn't your choice to make, Julian said, his voice low and fierce. You took the most important moments of our life and you tried to manage them into a professional handshake. You tried to steal my grief from me, Elias. And you tried to steal my joy. He looked down at Elias's stomach. We're having a baby. And you were going to do it alone. I was scared, Elias admitted, his voice breaking. I'm still scared. Julian, the doctor says the timeline isn't long. I didn't want you to be a widower at 35 with a newborn. I thought it would be better if you just forgot me. I could never forget you, Julian said. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against Elias's. I don't want protection from you. I want the time that exists. Whether it's 50 years or 5 months, I want every second of it. I want the hard days and the hospital rooms and the beef stew with the carrots I have to pick out. I want all of it, Elias. Because it's ours. Elias let out a sob then, a sound of absolute, shattering surrender. He reached up with his free hand and clutched Julian's shirt, pulling him closer. Julian held him, mindful of the 4 lines and the bump between them, and let Elias cry. He felt the dampness of Elias's tears against his neck, the frantic beat of his heart. In that small, quiet room, the walls Elias had built for months finally crumbled, leaving nothing but the raw, honest truth of 2 people who had almost missed each other in the dark. I'm sorry, Elias choked out. I'm so sorry, Julian. Don't be sorry, Julian whispered into his ear. Just don't ever leave me out again. Promise me. I promise, Elias said. He pulled back slightly, looking into Julian's eyes. But it's going to be hard. You don't know how hard. I know, Julian said. I read the letters, remember. I know about the tremors. I know about the vision. I know about the fear. And I am still here. I'm choosing this, Elias. I'm choosing you. Every single day. They stayed like that for a long time, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the room filled with the soft, blue shadows of twilight. Julian eventually moved from the chair to the bed, lying carefully beside Elias, his arm draped over the Omega's middle. He felt a small, distinct kick against his forearm, a rhythmic, insistent thud of life. He looked at Elias, who was watching him with a tired, beautiful smile. "Is that Clara?" Julian asked. Elias nodded. "She's been active all evening. I think she knew you were coming." Julian pressed a kiss to Elias's temple. "I'm glad I didn't let you leave." "I'm glad too," Elias said. He reached down and tangled his fingers with Julian's over the swell of his stomach. "I was wrong about what protection means. I thought it meant keeping you away from the pain. But I think it actually means making sure you're not alone in it." "You're never going to be alone again," Julian promised. "We're going to the Alps, Elias. Maybe not next spring. Maybe not the way we planned. But we're going. We'll find a way." Elias closed his eyes, his breathing slowing as he drifted towards sleep, exhausted by the emotional upheaval of the afternoon. "I'd like that," he murmured. "Just, don't forget the ferns." "I won't," Julian said, his voice thick with a mixture of sorrow and a strange, fierce kind of hope. "I watered them before I left. They're fine, Elias. Everything is going to be fine." He watched Elias fall asleep, the Omega's face finally peaceful, the tension that had lived in his brow for months finally dissolved. Julian looked around the room. The box of letters was sitting on the nightstand, its lid open, the white envelope spilling out like a confession. He realized then that the letters hadn't been a goodbye at all. They had been a bridge. A long, winding, painful bridge that Elias had been building in the dark, hoping that one day, Julian would find the strength to cross it. And he had. He was on the other side now, and he wasn't going back. The future was uncertain, the trajectory was clear, and the window was shorter than it should have been. But as Julian listened to the dual heartbeats in the quiet room, Elias's slow, steady thrum and the baby's frantic, energetic thrum, he knew that they had already won. They had found the words. They had claimed the time. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The things we never say are the truest things we ever feel, but the things we finally say are the ones that save us. Julian stayed awake long after the hospital had settled into its nighttime rhythm. He watched the moonlight crawl across the floor, illuminating the scattered papers of Elias's heart. He thought about the letters he would write now. Not unsent ones. Not secret ones. He would write them in the way he held Elias's hand, in the way he would learn to manage the medications and the appointments, in the way he would tell their daughter about the man who loved them both enough to try and leave, and the man who loved him enough to stay. He thought about the ordinary things, the stew, the laundry, the lavender in the window box. Those were the real declarations. Those were the things that built a life, however long or short it might be. He reached out and touched the cedar box one last time, then closed the lid. The secrets were over. The story was just beginning. It was a Tuesday when it all started to fall apart, but it was a Thursday when they finally began to put the pieces back together, one word, one breath, one heartbeat at a time. The air in the room felt lighter, the scent of sandalwood and pine mingling into something new, something resilient. Julian closed his eyes and let himself drift, anchored by the weight of the person beside him, knowing that for the first time in a very long time, they were exactly where they were supposed to be. The silence was no longer a predator, it was a witness. And as the first light of dawn began to touch the edges of the curtains, Julian realized that too late was a lie. As long as there was a voice to speak and a heart to listen, it was always just in time. He thought of the letter about the snore, the very first one he had read. He smiled in the dark. He would snore tonight, he decided. He would snore and he would take up space and he would be as loud and present as possible, so that if Elias woke up in the middle of the night, he wouldn't have to reach for a pen. He would only have to reach for Julian. And Julian would be there, steady as a bridge, waiting to catch every word Elias had ever been afraid to say. The letters had done their work. They had carried the truth across the silence, and now, they could rest. Julian pulled the blanket up over Elias's shoulder, a small, daily action that felt like a prayer. He was an alpha who built things that stayed up, and he was going to build a world for Elias and their child, a world made of honesty and time and the kind of love that doesn't need to hide in a box. It was the only thing he knew how to do. It was the only thing that mattered. The sun rose higher, casting a long, golden beam across the bed, and Julian finally slept, his hand never letting go of Elias's, their fingers intertwined in a grip that even the end of the world wouldn't be able to break. They had everything after Tuesday, and for now, that was more than enough. It was everything. It was the whole world. Julian woke a few hours later to the sound of a nurse entering the room. She was carrying a tray of breakfast, oatmeal and juice. She looked surprised to see him there, but she didn't say anything, only gave him a small, knowing nod. Elias was awake, sitting up against the pillows. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. He was watching the steam rise from the oatmeal with a look of quiet contemplation. When he saw Julian wake, he smiled. It wasn't the brittle, forced smile of the last few months. It was the old smile, the one that reached his eyes and made the corners crinkle. "You're still here," Elias said, his voice soft. "I told you," Julian said, stretching his stiff limbs. "I'm not going anywhere. I've got a lot of onions to chop, remember." Elias laughed, a small, genuine sound that made Julian's heart ache with joy. "I think I can handle the carrots today, at least." Julian stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the morning. The city was waking up, the streets beginning to fill with cars and people, everyone rushing toward their own futures, their own secrets. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the box in the hallway closet. Without it, he might have been one of those people, rushing toward a future that didn't include the person he loved most. He turned back to Elias, who was tentatively taking a spoonful of oatmeal. After breakfast, Julian said, "We're going to talk to the doctor. Together. We're going to find out exactly what the next few months look like. No more managing things alone, Elias. No more secrets." Elias nodded, his expression serious. "I know. I'm ready. I don't want to be alone anymore, Julian." "You aren't," Julian promised. He sat back down on the edge of the bed and took Elias's hand. "We're going to make a plan. For the baby, for you, for us. We're going to live, Elias. Not just wait. We're going to live." Elias reached out and touched Julian's cheek, his fingers steady for the first time in weeks. "I'd like that. I'd like that very much." They spent the rest of the morning talking, really talking. Not about the weather or the news or the mundane details of their separate lives, but about the things that mattered. They talked about the diagnosis, the symptoms, the fears that had kept Elias awake for months. They talked about the baby, about the kind of parents they wanted to be, about the names they liked. They talked about the Alps, and the house they wanted to live in, and the ferns that needed watering. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were tears, and there were moments of silence where the weight of the future felt almost too heavy to bear. But they didn't pull away. They stayed in the room, in the moment, in the truth. And as they talked, the shadows that had lived between them for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a clear, steady light. By the time the doctor arrived, Julian felt like he had a map. It wasn't a map of a long, easy road, but it was a map nonetheless. He knew where the pitfalls were, where the steep climbs would be, and where they could stop to rest. He knew what they were facing, and he knew that they were facing it together. The doctor was surprised to see Julian there, but he seemed relieved. He sat down and went through the medical details again, this time with both of them listening. He talked about the new clinical trials, the physical therapy options, the ways they could manage Elias's comfort and the baby's health. It was a lot of information, but Julian took notes, his architect's mind already beginning to organize the data into a structure, a plan. When the doctor left, Elias looked at Julian with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" "I told you," Julian said, putting his notebook away. "I build things that stay up. This is just a different kind of project." Elias leaned back against the pillows, his eyes fluttering shut. "I think I'm going to sleep for a while. The good kind of sleep." "Go ahead," Julian said. "I'll be right here." He watched Elias fall into a deep, restful slumber, the kind of sleep that only comes when the heart is finally at peace. Julian sat in the chair, the cedar box resting on his lap. He thought about the letters inside, the fury, the tenderness, the fear, and the love. He thought about the man who had written them, and the man who had read them. He realized that the letters weren't just a record of the past, they were foundation for the future. They were the evidence of a love that had survived the dark, a love that had been tested and found to be unbreakable. He reached into the box and pulled out a blank sheet of paper and a pen. He began to write. "Dear Elias," he started. "You're sleeping right now, and the sun is hitting the lavender on the windowsill just the way you said it would. I'm sitting here watching you, and I'm thinking about all the things I didn't say for the last 4 months. I'm thinking about the snow, and the bluebird mug, and the way the world feels right again now that I'm back in it with you. I'm not going to keep this letter in a box. I'm going to leave it right here on the nightstand so you can see it when you wake up. I want you to know that I'm not here because I have to be. I'm here because there's nowhere else I'd rather be. I'm here because you are my home, and I'm finally back where I belong. We have a lot of work to do, and the road isn't going to be easy. But we're going to walk it together, one step at a time. And one day, we're going to take Clara to the Alps, and we're going to watch her run in the snow, and we're going to remember this room and this morning and the way we found each other again. I love you, Elias. Always. Julian. He folded the letter and placed it on the nightstand, right next to the daisies. He looked at Elias one last time, then leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. The silence of the room was no longer heavy, it was full of the sound of breathing, of life, of a future that was finally, irrevocably, their own. The letters had been sent, the truth had been told, and the rest was just a matter of time. And in that moment, Julian knew that time was exactly what they were going to make the most of. Every second. Every heartbeat. Every word. They had everything after Tuesday, and it was beautiful. It was enough. It was everything. The story of the box was over, but the story of Julian and Elias was just beginning, written not on paper, but in the quiet, steady devotion of every day that followed. And as the sun reached its zenith, bathing the room in a warm, golden glow, the two of them slept, side by side, anchored by a love that had refused to be protected, and in doing so, had saved them both. The letters were just the beginning, the life they were building was the real masterpiece. And as Julian's hand stayed firmly clasped in Elias's, the world outside continued its frantic pace, unaware that in room 312, two people had found the only thing that truly mattered, the courage to be seen, and the strength to stay. The end was coming, as it does for everyone, but for Julian and Elias, the middle was going to be magnificent. And that was all they ever needed to know.